So now that brings us to looking at the operational perspective of Army aviation. And it's my great pleasure to introduce a good friend and the branch chief of the last couple of weeks, so he can give his vision of the way ahead for the next 4 years for Army aviation. Major General Bill Gayler.
Thanks, I appreciate it. All right, I think I'm on now. So first off, the governor left, I think, Joe, right? Did he already depart? I didn't get the opportunity to correct him. Usually when we cite the University of North Georgia, formerly known as North Georgia College, we all add in academic powerhouse to the tail end of that. It is good to be back. It is good to be back in Georgia, and I'll tell you, so I was raised in Georgia, born in Alabama, born at Fort Rucker, raised in Georgia about an hour from here. There was traffic then too, so sorry if you suffered through some of that as you made your way in, but my wife grew up about 15 minutes from here in the middle of the traffic, so it is a testament to my love and devotion to her that we're even married, because I had to drive through traffic to pick her up on dates. And being from the country, that was not something that I enjoyed doing. So I'm going to probably take a slightly non-standard approach to kind of walking you to what I think is the appropriate vision for the branch. I'm not going to start with a vision and priorities slide. I want to kind of walk back 15 years to kind of see where we are and to see what the world looks like today and what we think we need to do to address it, as General Perkins outlined in the Army operating concept, and then give you some branch thoughts. So that would help steer some of our vision. So if you would go to the next slide, or I have the little clicker up. Yep, all right, good. I'll let you do it, because you ought to see this thing. It's pretty complicated. It's got like 7 different buttons on it, and I am confident I will jack that up. So the world is very complicated. That is no surprise, and it's getting more and more complicated quicker and quicker. So if you looked at the rate of global instability and what that demand creates for us, we have some challenges that we have got to address. When you start looking at the correlation between that instability and resourcing, it matters. If you look back 15 years when this global war on terror started, and we came in with air-land battle doctrine, we realized we had to kind of quickly develop into a more coin-centered force. We developed or actually tweaked doctrine to better account for that. And then we also said, hey, because we have demand increasing and a threat that must be addressed, we had resources that were there to account for it. So we started growing in size force. We started growing in the manning. We started modernizing aircraft. We had the resources to do it. You saw Mike model UH-60s and Fox model Chinooks, Echo model Apaches entering the force, all as a result of we had resources, we had demand or need, and we met it. We found better ways to integrate UAS capabilities. So we've tweaked doctrine, adjusted doctrine, we've adjusted our resources to meet the demand, and we also looked at the threat and said we've got to account and apply resources to counter risk to our crews and risk to our passengers. Drive-by fieldings is not intended to kind of poke anybody, but every commander and sergeant major that lived through a reset period, we had the ability to improve our airframes and our capabilities, and it was the right thing to do. But if you don't plan for them and they come at the most inappropriate time in your reset, it is not synchronized and not as effective as it could be to a trainer, but the capability is a requirement. We're never going to send somebody into harm's way without upgrading as much as possible those systems. But we did all of that. And that was when we were looking very centrally at the current fight and the risk, the threat. It was very appropriate. Now, that rate of instability continues to move, but resourcing is divergent from that. You now see reduced manning, as we've now dropped down to a 980,000 total force. The demand has not gone down. So we ask a great deal. We ask now that institutions continue to be flexible, because I don't think the budget is going to be solved quickly, nor should we expect it. We have got to find ways to do more with the same. Now, as you look back on that 15 years, I mean, we've just had some staggering successes. We've flown over 20 million flight hours as a branch. We're constantly deployed today, as we all remember all of those deployed. We paid tremendous cost in treasure to meet that demand. So as we are now forced with reduced budgets, the goodness in it is that it makes us prioritize. It makes us now appropriately put money where we need money. And it is a constant balance between the modernization programs, the current readiness and training resources of our forces, and force structure. But we've got to be informed by the Army operating concept, informed by our adversaries and what technologies they are producing, because they're going to school on everything we're doing. They have been watching everything we have been doing for 15 years. Next slide, please. So this is the world, sort of. What you see up there, this shaded area, is the oftentimes referred to arc of instability. We take creative license to move it here and there every once in a while with the suture briefing. Where you see a blue star and a red star is everywhere we have aviation that is either forward stationed, operating, or has a theater security cooperation or assistance mission in order to counter terrorism, to posture to respond to a humanitarian assistance, very importantly to assure an ally or a valued partner, and to deter an adversary. Today, across that globe, we have 35 battalions committed. 35 battalions committed. 30 of those are active component battalions. And I had a great discussion with the state aviation officers and command teams from the National Guard yesterday about we have got to find a better way to gain access to capability, because it is difficult to sustain. Where you see the shaded circles inside of the lightly shaded area, that is everywhere that a U.S. Army helicopter cannot lift its full complement of payload, passengers, or fuel because of power limits. 84% of the globe is all we can get to with our current power generation. In Afghanistan alone, 47%. But with continued modernization focus on an ITEP capability, that will be 96%. When you have to manage your payload fuel, ammo, in order to accomplish the mission, and you put 8 or 9 Blackhawks to move a platoon because of a power limitation, when it could be done with 4, imagine the waste. The risk goes up, fuel consumption, operating costs, putting forward arming and refueling points out, that risk goes up. When we can't fly but 4 or 5 people in the back of an aircraft because of power limitation, when we say we give commanders options, we are capable of giving commanders options. But we also sometimes give a limitation. And we've got to fix that. In addition to the deployed op tempo, certainly we are continually supporting back at home station with all of the combat training center rotations, home station training events, and you are living it. If you're a soldier or a family, you're living it, you know it's busy, and we know it's probably not going to slow down anytime soon. Next slide, please. So where do we need to continue to focus? I already mentioned that our adversaries are going to school on us. They're looking at everywhere. One, they're looking at how we operate. They're looking at what we operate around so that they can counter or avoid our advantages and exploit any vulnerability we may have. But when you look at the Army operating concept, we know we have an expeditionary maneuver requirement. We have to be able to cover in wide areas with continuous reconnaissance and security. You have to continue to transport people and things over great distances. We've got to continue to protect our own systems and our own people. Ultimately, what aviation does is it finds stuff to aid in understanding, it moves stuff, and it kills stuff. And it's invaluable to a commander on the ground. As you look at our ability to dominate since the inception of aviation prior to the branch in Vietnam coming out of the Korean conflict, we have truly enabled a domination of an adversary. And we brought in airframes, the Chinook, Blackhawks, Apaches, and the 60s and 70s technology, and what it provides us today, that's Chinook. Brought in 1964. Its scheduled departure from service is 2064. That's 100 years on that airframe. When you look at the Apache and the Blackhawk, it is similar. And because we have a divergence of resources and global instability and our ability to meet it, we do create gaps in what we know we need to do in the future. And we need to fill those gaps with what I call reach, protection, and lethality. And when I describe reach, to me, I want to deny sanctuary to any adversary in terms of power, range, speed, endurance, and the ability to get to them regardless of a weather condition or an environmental condition. Reach. It's the only way to enable the Army operating concept, to provide multiple dilemmas, continuous wide area reconnaissance and security, to dominate, overmatch, provide advantage, to cause dilemmas to your enemy. Achieve surprise through maneuver. I would argue that our current airframes have reached the feasible evolutionary limit to meet the Army operating concept. We can certainly do things to make them go a little faster, make them stay a little longer, but not to the duration, range, or times we need to execute the Army operating concept. When we talk protection and survivability, the proliferation of air defense systems right now, you look at Russia, Kaliningrad, developments of their anti-access area denial, surface-to-surface, surface-to-air layered capabilities, and then Crimea and also South Latakia. Wow, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? They're trying to dominate regionally, and that presents challenges to us. We must continue and always work to counter technologies to enable survivability. We have got to be able to be more lethal when we get there. We go with less, you stay longer over greater ranges, carrying more ammunition that is small, light, and precision. That's the wide area, continuous reconnaissance, security, overmatched to an adversary. That's kind of what we're thinking. Next slide, please. So, to meet the Army's 20 warfighting challenges, it transitions to core competencies of an aviation force. Again, oversimplified, it's find, understand, move, and kill stuff. But then, how does that translate to the Army operating concept that General Perkins was describing? You know, to meet all of the wide area continuous reconnaissance requirements, develop situational awareness through action, surprise through maneuver, requires reach, protection, and lethality. And we've got to stay on a path to enable that. Next slide, please. So, kind of said, hey, here's what we were looking at in the last 15 years. This is the world. This is how it integrates into the Army operating concept. And now just simply branch thoughts that kind of get us to the vision for the branch. So we don't see an aviation force growing. I mean, I don't think next year they're going to suddenly say, we're going to give you 20 cabs because demand's high. It's not going to happen. So a few years ago, a study was done that described a 15 active duty cab requirement. But we have 10 cabs. We're not going to go to 15. How do you get the effect of 15 cabs with 10? We've got to start leveraging technology. We've got to stop using 9 Blackhawks to move a platoon. We need power. You need range, speed, endurance, and an ability to operate in all environments. That's how you play up. You're fighting up a weight class or 2. When we look at our UAS programs, we must become less reliant on runways. So if you need a Gray Eagle 4,500-foot runway, look back at that arc of instability, point out where in those areas we think we're going to conveniently establish so that we can operate our systems. At the tactical level, we've got to have them more forward-placed and responsive to need of a ground commander. When we look at that increased power, we've got to have power available to grow more. If you look at the UH-60 platform, and it's similar for all of our platforms, since its inception and the initial capability or the CAPE documents, to meet a 6,000-foot, 95-foot vertical rate of climb power requirement. We've grown over 1.25 tons on that airframe. On a linear line, a Black Hawk grows in weight 78 pounds a year. So today, we're taking 8 to 9 aircraft to move a platoon above 6K95 or at other temperature and altitude combinations. If we stay on a linear growth path, by year 2020, we'll be able to move 2 people on that aircraft. So it will take 15 to 20 Black Hawks to move a platoon. We've been growing and gaining weight for all the right reasons. Every new technology, everything designed to protect a crew or its passengers. But we've given maneuverability at the objective away. We've given away payload. We've given away ammo. We're limiting options to a commander. We're not giving options. We do give options if the weather's right. But if the weather's not right, we can't give options. We got to figure this out. And we have to stay focused in that direction. At the end of the day, you will have incredible soldiers doing our nation's work. And they will do it with whatever we give them. Even with some of what you're hearing as a limitation today, we have great airframes that we've just made heavy and less maneuverable. But you have soldiers that are flying and doing amazing things with them because they always will. The risk goes up. A soldier is going to mitigate risk with a leader involvement, and they're going to do it. We continue to develop the best leaders in the world, in a complex world, to operate in ambiguity. And we do it very, very well. We've got to maintain focus on giving them in 2030, 2040, the proper equipment. You don't want your grandchildren flying the same aircraft your father flew. Next slide, please. So that kind of leads you to, that's how we're thinking. And of course, we will have professional soldiers that are modernized formations to meet the required support to the ground commander. The soldier on the ground will always be the number one focus for air crews, while providing options to a combatant commander through reach, protection, and lethality that enable us to win in a very complex world. There is no other option. I've talked the tasks throughout, but I would leave you with, because it's a balance between a modernization, readiness, and force structure, you can never have everything. We just have to stay consistent, demonstrate need, but recognize budgets probably aren't going to change quickly. Environments aren't suddenly going to become friendlier. The world is not going to get any less complicated. So to build and sustain readiness to meet and win the current fight is always the first priority for units not in direct contact with an enemy force. And that is in the manning, equipping, training, and leader development arenas. So that is generally where our heads are right now with the branch. I want to say that First, I am incredibly honored and humbled at the opportunity to lead the branch. We have such capable soldiers, incredibly led, supported by incredibly dedicated families that enable our service to the nation. And the gravity of the challenges that we face are not lost on me, I will guarantee you. That is all I have, above the best. Thank you.
Well, that was obvious that Bill's already got a great grasp of where aviation is and where it's going, and will be a great branch chief for us for the next coming years. So great to have him and Michelle leading the branch.